Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the podcast. My name is Dr. Tiffany A. Flowers, and this is the Flower Garden Podcast. Usually, I try to talk about a variety of issues. I try to keep literacy to more of a broader spectrum. So I've talked about financial literacy. I've talked about literacy for working class families. I've talked about the need to adapt and change within this economy. I've also talked a lot about ways that parents can work with children. But today I wanted to talk about some of the concerning things that I see in the media, as well as some of the decisions that are being made at the local level. And I say that they're concerning because as a researcher in literacy, I look at a variety of issues when I'm doing my own research. So my specialty is actually working with children who struggle with reading, which is why I run a literacy reading clinic. It's something that I've built up to over my 25-year career in education. And I also focus on ways that communities can help children. So I look at things such as book deserts in terms of whether families have access to literacy. And I also look at the role that libraries play in the literate lives of children. And so, as I'm doing new research studies and I'm coming to new understandings, as all researchers do about different things, we spend a considerable amount of time looking at past research. We look at the research that we've done. We read the research by other people. We also take the time to look at claims that people have made and decisions that are currently centering around things that we're studying. So I have my concerns about some of the things that I'm starting to see in the media. So more recently, I attended the Literacy Research Association conference, and we were discussing policy issues on the panel where I presented. And of course it gets heated. We all are very passionate about helping children and families and ensuring that we are doing the very best that we can do and making sound decisions. And that was something that came up. We talked about that in terms of the decision making that's happening. And, all of us were just wondering, and especially me, I wondered, what's the root of some of these decisions that are being made? How do you make a decision to do something drastic in terms of literacy when literacy is in an underfunded state? It's in an underfunded state of affairs. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today, I wanted to kind of narrow down my discussion rather than doing a broad discussion. I wanted to narrow it down to 5 areas of concern that I see happening at the local level, which people need to be made aware of. Because you have to understand that whenever policy decisions are swift and quickly implemented, sometimes they're implemented without a lot of research being done to do it. Other times they're implemented with the idea that, hey, if we make this cut here, it's going to help people here. So we'll be able to redirect these funds because we may not necessarily see progress, as much progress as we think we should see. So I wanted to talk to you about 5 areas of concern that I keep seeing over and over in the media, and then talk to you a little bit about why it's concerning and why you should be sounding the alarm in terms of what's going on with our children and literacy. So the first thing that I noticed is the closing or the suggested closing of libraries in the community as well as media centers in schools. So I wanted to talk a little bit briefly about that. So more recently I was on a podcast with librarians, and they were, discussing a variety of issues in terms of what it would mean if libraries closed. And I talked about, when I went through school, my professor talked about this all the time. He would say that there's always some genius that thinks that if you have a media specialist, you don't need a librarian. He said it's just like if you go buy a house and a realtor says, well, you could have a kitchen or you can have a bathroom. And that's essentially what you're asking someone who is in the process of helping children become literate. Libraries are a lifeline. Libraries are a lifeline because if a school library doesn't necessarily have resources, or if there's no media center in the school, typically we go to community libraries, or we go to the media center in the school to try to get as many books as we can into our classrooms. So teachers utilize these media centers as well as parents and students. Whenever we have a parent who comes to school and says, hey, my child is not reading, we don't send them to the reading specialist. They're already getting services from the literacy coaches and reading specialists, and they're already getting classroom interventions. We send them to the library, we send them to the media specialist, and we direct them to the city librarian because they already have monthly reading programs in place, summer reading programs in place. They have book lists according to theme, subject, reading level. And so we send them to the people we're supposed to send them to, who are the information specialists. We send them to the media specialists who teach them that in addition to reading books, they also need to become media literate. So they're giving them access to documentaries, television shows that are directed toward children that focus on learning, such as Reading Rainbow and things like that. So we can't get rid of the media specialists and the librarians, or you will have a generation of children who with no access to literacy. They won't learn how to read. It's possible that they may never learn to read because there's nobody else to redirect them. A machine cannot replace an information specialist. And, the experiment of trying to make them replace important degree professionals is a joke. Anyone who is actually in the science field will tell you, anybody who's in tech will tell you that AI is in its infancy. It's just not there. It has to be trained. And if you don't believe me, I want you to look. I always encourage people to read and get the information on your own. Go look at all of the news articles that have come out recently where they're talking about how they need degree professionals to leverage AI so that we can be able to use this software more effectively. So the second thing, or the second local policy that I'm noticing, that I'm seeing, is requiring less access to books by ensuring that you tell parents or create a policy that children don't have to read books. I just saw a recent story about this online about a situation that's happening in the Capitol in D.C. where a parent is really concerned because they're no longer requiring children to read full books. So just to be clear, how this can be damaging. If you read any research literature, and I recommend that you all go to Yahoo, I recommend because as everyday citizens, you may not have access to research. But I'm going to tell you where to get some of the open access. Go to Yahoo, go to ResearchGate, go to Google Scholar, and a lot of those networks, Claravit, they're connected to the outlets that will get you the research for free. So you can actually go in and research those. You can actually go in and read those research studies and download the research for yourself. And one of the things that I want you to look up is I want you to look up what's called volume of reading. Anybody who studies literacy knows that the volume of reading is the final goal that we want children to get to. We want children to be able to not just read a book, a picture book, a chapter book, a series book, a novel. We want children by the end of their educational career to be able to read books for their age group, which is books for adults, for new adults. So in order to get there, you have to focus on volume of reading. So if someone is telling you that there's some new research out that suggests that children don't need volume of reading beginning in grade 1, and that they are telling you in middle school that children don't need to read a full book, I would have to question the credentials of that person. I would look them up. I need to know what research study they're citing. I need to go further. I need to know where that research study was published. I read research every week. It is something that is a function of my position. I've never seen a study that suggests that this is a good thing. So we need to start having more of these conversations and making sure that we're getting accurate information into the hands of the people who are making these decisions. The third thing that I want to look at is also this idea that you only need 5 components of instruction. So, I'm familiar with the No Child Left Behind. I'm familiar with the current push in terms of ensuring that 5 components are, taught. But when I go and I read my colleagues' work, they've never suggested, the colleagues that are actually doing the research on reading have never suggested that the 5 components is all you need. And I worry that people are misinterpreting the research on reading. There is a book, and it's written in a plain language that a lot of parents will be able to understand, so I want to recommend it to you. It's called What Really Matters for Struggling Readers, Designing Research-Based Programs. It was written by Richard Allington. He's done so many different updates to that book, and he has a recent update. But you can go back if you want to and grab one of the earlier copies, because every lesson that he's teaching you about synthesizing the research and making it plain so that parents, teachers, everybody can have access to this information. There's even schedules in there in terms of him looking at the research, synthesizing it for a general audience that's not in the field of literacy, so that you know the type of schedules that children are supposed to have. And it's an amazing work because he's looking at all the research in the field, everything. So one of the things that always amazes me is that even with the new editions of that text, he does not waver in terms of the understanding of what makes solid reading instruction. So he always recommends a certain amount of minutes of literacy instruction per day for students, which I think is critical, because you need to understand that he's not talking about books. He's talking about the amount of instruction that children need to have. And so he focuses more, in my opinion, on the volume of instruction that children need to have. And I can really see some promise in this research area. So what I would say is, after, reading his work, I would say that you need to make sure that children have at least 2.5 hours of reading instruction in the day. If you're a parent who's sitting on the PTA and you're listening to this podcast, please feel free to reach out to me. So some areas that we must have in order to give children access to literacy daily: read aloud. I know that there are some schools who have taken out read aloud. You need to make sure that that's back into the curricula, because that's how you model fluency for children. That's how you model reading motivation for children. That's how you model reading across genres, meaning reading across different types of books for children. So if you remove that, then you remove that exposure for your children. The other thing that we need to look at is the writing workshop. Writing workshop can be implemented as early as kindergarten. It's taught all the way up through 12th grade. DEAR time, which is drop everything and read time. We also want to make sure that people are doing at least 20 minutes of small group instruction with your students. For the children who are doing the small group guided reading, and they're reading books either where they're learning word study and doing a little bit of interactive writing with that framework, there's also the other end that's not being talked about, which are the children who are reading at a certain level, meaning that they're reading at or above grade level. And they could be doing literature circles, which there is plenty of research on literature circles, which is when children have the opportunity to read and discuss novels and books and ideas, and they get to focus on questions which have critical thinking. And, it's a critical component of the literacy process. There also should be a time where teachers focus on word study, meaning sight words, word study, meaning phonetics in terms of their spelling and things like that. But then there also needs to be a separate time that focuses on strategy building. So 5 to 10 minutes of strategy building to teach children things like context clues are really critically important, particularly in the second half of second grade or the beginning of third grade. And there are numerous books published that focus on context clues. So if you're a parent and you're out there listening and you're like, my child does phonics like nobody's business and they just need something else, it's probably because they didn't get instruction on context clues, because a lot of people are taking that out of the curricula as well. So if you are a parent and you're listening in, you can feel free to follow my podcast and send me questions, and I will make sure that I include that question and answer the next time I do a podcast. So number 4, in terms of another piece, another policy that I view as really damaging is the elimination of critical areas. And what I mean by that is there is no research that currently supports that schools should be eliminating science, social studies, math, and recess from the curricula. There is no research which supports eliminating the arts from the curricula. So if your child is in a school that is eliminating these things, what you need to know is there is research to the contrary. That if you offer a more rounded liberal arts education for students, if you give them physical activity and ensure they have chances to move around and express themselves, if you give them access to art, music, and culture, this actually enhances the literacy process. And to be clear, there are hundreds of research studies and published texts which support what I'm saying. The 5th area that you need to be concerned about, and this is one that has been a controversy for the past 20 years because I believe it deals with how money is reallocated. So there is no doubt that intervention or lack of having access to intervention is a problem right now. The money that is being used is being solely used for teacher training. It is not being used to provide training for teachers to get specific training in intervention where they would be certified in an area, and then they would take that certification, continue to receive more training through conferences and things like that, and then be able to go and teach. And what I mean by that is not the current training where people are talking about the 5 components. A lot of students are getting that at the college level right now. Teachers are getting a refresher and they're getting their little certificate. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is specifically getting training on an intervention program. There are several intervention programs on the market right now where people could be getting training in that area. And I'll give you one that has been around for more than 30 years. There is a movement to eliminate a critical intervention program known as Reading Recovery. Reading Recovery is a first grade intervention program that is delivered one-on-one. It is not delivered in a classroom setting. It is not delivered in small groups. It is a one-on-one program that is delivered only to less than 1 to 2% of a population of students who show that they are struggling in reading in first grade. Additionally, they only get the training for a certain amount of weeks. So the training that they only get the intervention in terms of one-on-one tutoring for a certain number of weeks. So because of that, when they end, they've made a lot of progress, but then they need to turn around that same population and get another aspect of intervention in the next grade level. So there's another program that is kind of in the shadows. It's called, I believe it's called, or formerly called Reading Rescue, and it was specifically for second grade. And so children who still need additional work should be focusing on reading rescue in second grade, right? So in third grade, we're starting to see the emergence of what's called the structured literacy, which is very similar to the other two programs, but it is specifically for children in third grade. The problem is there are no supports for children in fourth and fifth grade. So I'm hoping to see more of a wave of interventions begin in fourth and fifth grade, as well as more supports for children in middle and high school. But I wanted to bring that to your attention in terms of reading recovery, because there are people who are reading recovery trained in your community. You can find them online. There is a Reading Recovery of North America, and I want you to reach out to them because they have a listing of everyone who is a current certified person for that particular program, and they can help you. There is other help. It is not only just one form of reading out here. There's a number of things. There's a number of interventions that could be done within the community. So I'm hoping that, me highlighting these 5 concerns gives everybody a starting point to start being more critical about what's going on and not just accepting things. Because you don't have to accept things that are not within the research literature just because somebody tries to intimidate you with a PhD and tell you, I know. If someone says, well, the evidence says, ask them to show you the evidence. And if they're telling you something that is evidence that is not a research study, please send it to me and I'll let you know whether it's real or not. Because there's a habit of folks that I've seen where they're showing these research reports that are coming from think tanks that haven't been evaluated by professors in the field of literacy. There's not one person that has a degree in literacy that's written on it, and it's just a piece of paper, and we don't even know where those recommendations came from. So you all want to get what's called peer-reviewed research from academics with a PhD in literacy, and if you need recommendations on that, I can definitely provide you with links to the actual journals in the field of literacy that you all can get access to for about $20. Okay, you can get your local library to get a subscription. That's another way that you can get it. If you graduated from college, you can go and get a subscription to your college library because they have copies of the journals because professors are citing those in their research. There's a number of ways. If you can't afford to do that, you can go to the library and say, pay $1 and say, can you get me this journal in what's called interlibrary loan? It costs you $1. Don't ever let people try to intimidate you by saying or acting like they have more access to information than you do. This is America. Everything is for sale. You can get the information. Okay? All right, so let's recap because I want you to understand these 5 areas of concern because I want to make sure that you all have access. 1, my first area of concern, the closing of libraries and media centers, I believe, will devastate children. There is no research to support that closing libraries and media centers will help children in the literacy process, and it's absurd to think that it is. The second area, requiring children or not requiring children to read a book, a full book in middle school, is absurd. It's called the reduction of the volume of reading, and it goes against good practices and good research in literacy. The third, providing less time for instruction in literacy, providing less opportunity for children to practice and to gain entrance or entree into literacy, to become literate, through a series of activities that are designed to focus on reading, writing, learning words, learning how to use words, learning how to read and critically analyze novels and nonfiction information, and learning critical strategy building that sits outside of phonics, because we want them to have phonics. But we also need that strategy building. And I can do another follow-up if you all want me to give you some recommendations on some good strategy building books. Not having access to that strategy building is going to be detrimental. We also want to make sure that they have access to DEAR time, which is drop everything and read time, or silent reading time. And we also want to make sure that they have small group reading. It's critical. The fourth area, there is no research which supports that if you eliminate science, social studies, math, and recess, that children will read better. There's no research to support that. There's no research to support that if you eliminate the arts, that children will read better or have more time for reading. In fact, there's research on arts-based literacies. It's a whole body of research on that. And let me tell you where to look for it. I'm going to diverge. Make sure that you go to Google Scholar, type in arts-based literacies. Click to the left where it says full text and click enter. And hundreds of studies come up. The next thing that I want you to consider is that eliminating critical intervention programs in grades 1, 2, when children are just learning just learning how to read, just understanding the literacy process, when they're gaining interest in those critical early years, because that's what the research calls it, the critical early years. There's no intervention for them now. We already have classroom interventions. There's tiers of intervention. We already have that. But children need one-on-one intervention. So don't let anybody eliminate that and convince you that it's okay to, because there's no research which supports that children will read better. We can look at the literacy scores now and make and draw some conclusions in areas where they eliminated reading recovery and other early intervention programs in grade 2, and made it where children didn't get intervention until grade 3 through one-on-one interventions, not classroom. Teachers are already required to do classroom interventions. I am talking about the one-on-one interventions that we have always relied on to provide quality one-on-one literacy instruction beginning in grade 1. There was two researchers in Florida that focused on grade 2 because of what was going on in terms of literacy. So we should not be waiting until 3 to do SL, which is structured literacy, just because somebody made it up. So let's consider making sure that we get that information on reading recovery so we can go back to what's considered to be quality reading practice and ensuring that children have more access. Okay, my name is Dr. Tiffany A. Flowers. This is the Flower Garden Podcast. I look forward to receiving your questions so that I can provide you with critical information. And I will also drop my recommendations in the link in the description section below so that you can see the links and the title of the text. All right, everyone. I hope this podcast finds you and keeps you well. I hope that you are making it with everything that is happening right now. I hope that this podcast offers you a bit of hope. If you are a parent, feel free to reach out to me. I'll make sure that I record the podcast within 5 days of receiving your question. Take care.